Welcome to the Leaves of Change podcast, sponsored by Tree of Hope, a peer-run organization dedicated to serve the recovery community. Our hosts are Melissa Caffarelli and Nick Borowski. They regularly bring you inspirational stories of hope and recovery.
Welcome. We are sitting here in Second Chance in Potomac, and we are about to record the Tree of Hope podcast, Leaves of Change, and we asked Sarah Watson, who's going to share her experience, strength, and hope. And let's welcome Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Hi. Well, thank you for having me. I have 7 years of clean time, and I hope that my story can inspire you and motivate you and make you feel like you're not alone in this journey. So I guess I'll just kind of start with what got me into drugs, and then how I got clean, and then what I'm doing today to maintain my recovery. I started using when I was about 12. There was a lot of, I come from a broken home. There was a lot of issues when I was younger with my real father, and so that kind of transpired into the numbness and wanting to not feel, which was a huge part of me using, the emotional side of it and the mental health side of it. I started with drinking. I was 12 and I lived in Tennessee. I was born in Tennessee, and that led into smoking weed. And I moved to Washington State when I was 13. I got arrested for my first time, and I was at like a house party, and it was actually a security guard from my high school. I should be looking at you guys, shouldn't I?
No, that's fine.
Okay, you'll have to bear with me. This is my first little podcast. Yeah, I think it's more personal if I look at you guys.
Okay. You're fine. We're just chilling.
Okay, cool. So I was at my not first house party, but I was at a house party, and the security guard from my high school showed up and arrested all of us. I was 13.
A security guard?
Yeah.
Well, he was a cop.
Oh, okay.
He was a cop, but he was a security guard
assigned to the school.
at our school. And so, and I was a little troublemaker, and I was a little smart-mouthed, and I think I might have turned them off about truly wanting to help me. I had lived in Washington State, I think, for like 4 months. I had absolutely no clue where my home was, how to get there, just because I was so new to the state. And I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and the cop called my mom, but told her to go to the police station, and then they wouldn't give me a ride to the police station, so they made me walk home. And so then I'm like wandering around on the streets trying to, because I didn't know where I lived, and there was a car full of guys that picked me up and took me back to their house. And then this is the first time that I was introduced to meth. And I was sick from drinking, and so that was the first time I really saw meth. There was babies around, older men, older people smoking out of the light bulb, and I had never seen that before. And they had me snort some because I was throwing up from drinking, and they said that it would make me sober up a little bit. And that was my first experience. Like,
Logical, it's logical.
Oh yeah, totally.
Take this! You're not gonna pass out in my house. And then, the next day when it was light enough for me to recognize the streets, then I was able to go home. And my mom had been waiting for me. And I was already really upset about moving to Washington. It was my third dad. My mom met him at an airport layover, and we moved like 6 months later. And I remember I made her like sign a contract when we moved to Washington that if we weren't off HUD housing and food stamps, that we would move back to Washington. So that was my first business venture, was like writing that contract for my mom. But kind of with that being said is where that emotional state was. Like, I didn't want to be there. I was angry. I was a kid. And when I came back and I was in trouble, I laid in my bed and I had like a butcher knife, and I just wanted to die, and that was the first time that I really contemplated suicide. And I didn't attempt to do it, and I remember like holding it and thinking, oh, if I press in, and kind of, it just all got worse from there. I started drinking a lot more. I got into cocaine. I started smoking crack. I'm like 15 years old. And I remember specifically a lot of these times, you know, I remember one time I got really messed up, and I specifically said, I want to get as messed up as I can so that I can't feel. I don't want to feel anything. So a lot of my using was literally to escape reality, and there was a lot of mental health behind that. And I used to write a lot of spoken word and poetry. I started to do music. I did hip hop, and that was like a saving grace for me. I always wrote out my feelings, and so that really helped me a lot through those times. When I got reintroduced to meth, which I think I was about 16 at that time, I used it for another 6 years, and I was a functioning addict. So
functioning meth user.
Right.
Yeah.
So at this point, did you ever get prescribed like Adderall or something? It was probably the 90s during that whole phase, you know, of the being prescribed Ritalin. I mean, I was one of the victims of getting prescribed amphetamines, but you went like right to the meth.
yeah.
Like you didn't even
Dabble in the prescription
Right.
or anything?
get
No,
prescription stimulants, or it was just meth.
Not from a doctor. I mean, I tried pills sometimes,
Right.
but they weren't really my thing. I think the adrenaline and the, you know, delusion and kind of other reality you go into when you're up for like 3 or 4 or 5 days. And most of it was that, like, I felt like I could do anything in the world.
Right.
You know, until it really took over
We're
me.
like-
Until you see the Bush Ninjas and
Yeah.
the Shadow
God.
People.
And
They're out there.
so people didn't know how bad it was because I had different groups of friends. So I had like my drinking friends, I had my crack friends, I had my meth friends, I had my
Yeah.
straight friends. And when I would get really sick and I picked my face a lot, and sometimes I would have like really thick scabs on my face and they would get infected. And so there was one time that I just had my mom like lock me in the house and was like, please don't open the door, I don't want anyone to see me. So my parents saw me through a lot of that, but other people didn't. And so I remember like the first time I reached out for help, and when I really was like, I have a problem, I was doing meth with like this 50-year-old guy, and you know, people that were a lot older that would like take a bump before work, and I realized that I could do this for the rest of my life, looking at how old they are, and still going to work and having a job and having a family. That's when it really sunk into me that I could do this for the rest of my life and no one will know how much I'm suffering. Because at that point, it wasn't that I wanted to do it anymore. It was, you know, if it were around me, I didn't seek it out too much, but it would just always somehow show up just because of the crowd that I was in, you know? And so I felt like I couldn't escape it. So if I ever knew it was around, or if it was around me, I couldn't not do it. I had to do it. And that's one thing that I love about other addicts is like, I don't have to explain that.
Yeah.
You know, they get it,
Yeah, I get it.
right? Whereas like other people that haven't experienced that, they're like, what do you mean?
Yeah, why don't you just stop?
Yeah, or like just say
Stop.
no.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? It's like
Yeah.
never again.
And so, you know, I remember like getting to the point where I hated myself, and I remember hitting the pipe and just literally like hating myself while I was hitting it because I couldn't stop. And I had tried a couple times and it didn't work. I never like went to treatment facilities. Actually, I don't think I ever really heard about treatment facilities. But I had my own place, I was independent, I was young, I had a job, I felt like, you know, I'm handling this. And binge drinking was also a big part of this. And I got sick of starting my life over all the time for years. Like I would self-sabotage everything. I'd go to school, and then when we go get the final, I'd drop out of school.
Wow.
You know, doing like I had this vision of the woman that I could be,
Right.
you know, and I really believed in myself that I that I could be beautiful and that I could be successful and that I have a lot to offer the world and that I'm talented, but I could never
Make it happen.
follow
Right,
through.
Right.
You'd start a lot of things and never finish
Right.
them, right?
Yeah, or an opportunity
I
would
feel like-
arise and I would
Same,
sabotage
that's
it.
my
For sure.
story too, yeah.
Yeah. Plus, you're a creative. You're an artist. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
You're a
I was an
rapper.
artist too. And we're sensitive people.
Yeah.
You know, drugs kind of, filter those feelings. So I
Yeah.
can definitely relate to that. Starting things, never finishing
finishing.
them.
Yeah.
Self-sabotaging.
Impulsive, compulsive. Yeah. It's my story.
So with the music, I did hip hop for probably like 15 years, but I started young.
What
and
was
I got
your name? Did you have a rap name?
Serenity.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So you still haven't given me your mixtape yet.
I know.
I will. I know. I'm gonna send it to
Yeah.
you. I will.
Okay.
We're gonna
I'll send you
we're
guys
gonna
the
put
link.
a link on the bottom of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'm
Maybe.
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
I'm all
cool.
right with that. It's been a while since I've written anything new, but it's all on there.
Cool.
And that was, an outlet for me. And I think when I was 17, I started getting featured on like local albums. And then I had a local label that wanted to sign me and help me with an album. And that was the first time that I really, because I was always alone. I mean, I just busted flows to like anybody that would listen. I'd be at the mall, I'd be at school, I'd be like, check this out. And then finally, like, that led me to people that did music and like doing music with them. And then when I had this group of people that believed in me, I grew so much and we put out an album. But then there was also like the regular kind of music story that went along with that, where I hustled and I got a lot of shows and I made a lot of connections, and they were getting all of the recognition and they were kind of stealing my contacts when I didn't have bigger shows and not sharing those with me. And so there was like a lot of stuff that was going on kind of towards the end with that album. And ultimately, when I had a following, at least in my hometown hero or whatever, I mean, I was respected, but it's hard to sell when you're a female rapper, because like the pop scene is really where you'd sell, and I was in the rap underground. But anyways,
That's so cool.
So cool. So cool.
That's
Wow.
She's like, I didn't want to sell out. I'm doing rap underground.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess I missed the most important part is when I started that journey with them, I quit doing meth. I only drank like a couple times. I put my heart and my soul and like everything that I had for a couple years into this album. And then when it went south, right after my album release, they kind of took my contacts and started having these bigger shows and then wouldn't include me or invite me. So I completely got shoved out of the scene in my area. I mean, I could put on my own shows and stuff, but like they were getting bigger names. And so it was just a really bad feeling, and we ended on bad terms. And it like shot me into this huge depression. And there was this guy from Buffalo, New York, who was an older gentleman, and he wanted to try to manage me. So we were doing like a management trial. He knew about my addiction to meth and my struggles with alcohol. I was starting to be triggered, and I didn't want that, but the triggers were coming from the issues that I was having with the label. And so he knew my vulnerabilities. And then he ultimately ended up taking advantage of me and taking advantage of the state that I was in. And he put a pill in my drink, and I mean, you know the story after that. But that shot me into like such a severe depression, and I started drinking because I had blacked out for probably, I think it was like 15 hours after I had that drink with him. And so after that event happened, it was like, all I did was drink hard alcohol because I wanted to see, can I really black out that much? Like, did I really get a drug put in my drink, or was I just super drunk? Mm-hmm. And like that was a big thing that I always struggled with too when stuff like this would happen, would be, it's my fault. Like I did something, and not and so I lost my job, like all things, like it just went downhill from there. And I fell into a huge depression. I tried to commit suicide again. Luckily it didn't work. I lost my job. I moved back in with my mom. I think at this time I was like 27 or something. And then I found myself starting to do things that I normally wouldn't do, like drinking during the day. Like I went to a bar to take a shot, and then I'd go down to the river to try to write music, and I'd take a 40 with me. And, you know, I started dabbling with heroin, which is something that I didn't like. And luckily that didn't take me down that road. But, so I was noticing these new trends of using that I didn't do before. I had never taken medication. I had never tried to address my mental health. I was so sad. I was just so like broken, and I was just so sick of starting like my life over, and especially like getting to that point where my dream was like there, and that just crushed me. It just crushed me so much. But it probably would have happened at some point because I never addressed like the drug use or the mental health. And then I was trying to go to school, dropped out, and finally I had gotten a DUI before, which was the first time I was ever introduced to AA. And then in AA I learned about NA, but I didn't stay in it. That was like years before, but I knew about it. So that DUI kind of planted the seed that there is a place that I can go. And so I decided to start going to NA and to get clean. And I remember like the first week or couple weeks that I was going, it's like I'd go and I'd be like, I have a day clean, and then I'd use. And then I'd go back and be like, I have 3 days clean, and then I'd use. And then after a couple weeks of that, or a week of that, I realized like, no one's forcing me to be there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I'm doing this for myself.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm not applying myself to this, you know, I'm only fooling myself. I'm only hurting myself. And so I took the instruction and did 90 meetings in 90 days. Got a home group. I reached out to women. I got a sponsor. I sometimes I even went to 2 meetings a day, and I loved the people that I met. They were very important to me. They were very supportive. And after, I just got that hope back, you know, and like I saw like the Sarah that I always knew was in there starting to come out. And so my dreams started to come out too. And I was like, you know, there's no reason why I can't like finish my degree. There's no reason why I can't move to Cali and like try to be a rapper, you know, all these things.
Freedom to do what you want.
Yeah. And so I finished my AA. I actually got 2 of them. I got an AA, just a regular transfer, and then I got an AA in business administration. And then I got accepted into Cal Poly in California, and I moved down there. I had 10 months clean, and I moved down there, and I got into their, I finished, while I was there, my bachelor's degree in music industry studies and marketing management.
Wow.
Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah.
No wonder you're so good.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it was, and also when I was down there, I went to NA because I didn't want to I didn't know anyone when I moved there. I didn't have any family there. I didn't have any friends there. Like I literally just moved away and tried, you know, to pursue my dream. And the best thing about that is that it really forced me, being alone, to love myself even more and rely on myself even more. Like I grew, like that period, that 3 years that I was in California and I was clean, I grew more than I could have ever expected, just internally, as a woman, as a person, as an individual. However, when I had about 1.5 years clean, the mental health side kicked back in. And I think this is when I realized, like, you can get clean, you can get sober, you can get the drugs and alcohol out of your body, but if you have mental health issues and you're not taking care of those, that can kill you just the same.
Right.
And like that can destroy your life. Because I had 1.5 years clean, and I think I was about 3 months, I don't remember. Well, maybe I didn't have 1.5 years, 11, 12, maybe just a little over a year, because I had only been in California for 3 or 4 months. And all of a sudden I just got depressed. It was like, holy shit, like, I don't know anybody here. I'm here by myself. I'm alone, like the feeling of just being alone. And I sunk into this huge depression where I wouldn't get out of bed, which is how it used to be in the past. Like, just lay in the bed, just hating myself, no hope, didn't know like why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And I remember I was so new to the NA out there, like I didn't know anybody. And so I literally had to reach out for help to strangers and be like, I'm struggling. I am not even brushing my teeth. Like I can't function right now. I'm about to drop out of school. I want to move back. Like not paying my bills, just the whole super isolation. And there was this one girl, and I love her for this, and she would come to my house. I think she did it for like a week. She was from NA. She would come to my house in the morning. She would bring me like a breakfast sandwich, and it was baby steps. She's like, you know what, baby steps, like let's take a shower today. You know what I'm saying? And go to a meeting. Let's like, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then that's when I decided to see a psychiatrist. And so at my college, I went and saw a psychiatrist, and I was so desperate because I didn't want to lose my clean time. I didn't want to use, but I was so much in despair and that like hopeless feeling that was the same that I had when I was using. And so when I saw the psychiatrist, he had me do like this 3-month mood chart every day for 3 months. And like, I can't even take vitamins every day. I'm not a very structured person like that, but I was so desperate to like really take care of that mental health side that I did it. I did it every day for 3 months and found out that I actually didn't have depression. I had a form of bipolar, which kind of scared me because, as I was telling you a little bit earlier, my mental health like runs through my family, and bipolar is very big in my family, and not in like the violent kind of way, but my mom was institutionalized a couple times, probably about 5 times. 2 years before I had moved to California, me and my sister found her unresponsive in the bathroom. She was delusional. She thought we were trying to kill her. So like her bipolar went very extreme. She would get manic and delusional, and but she went in and she got help. And so when I realized that I was diagnosed with bipolar, I was scared. Like, will it get to that extreme? But at the same time, I knew it was going on. That made sense on why when I had tried like one depression medicine before, but it actually made me suicidal. And he had told me if you take like the wrong drug for
Can make it worse.
Wow.
yeah. And so it's the best thing I ever did. Best thing. I have not fallen into a serious depression where I've isolated or just been super depressed for probably more than like 5 days in a row, and I'm still functional through that, and I'm able to pull myself out of that. And that's in the past 7 years. And so to go from like my whole life, and I started tracking it where like I would be depressed for anywhere from like 2 to 3 months at a time. So when I really started tracking that, I was like,
Yeah, there's a pattern.
that's almost half my life.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If I'm depressed, every other month for 2 months, that's half a year that I'm depressed.
But you're like now aware, so you can like from a different perspective, like look down and be like, when you were using.
Once you're aware of it, you can do something about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that was one of the best things that I ever did was to address my mental health and go see a counselor, and I got on correct mental health medication. And then, I mean, I don't know, I love life. Like I feel like a whole person today, addressing both of those, the substance use and the mental health. When I addressed that, I grew so much more, and I continued to go to therapy. I continued to go to NA. I fell in love, which was finally like I loved myself. I think that it just waited for me to be in that state where I loved myself before I could have true love. And then, so I ended up moving back to Washington with him because I had gone to high school with him. And I don't know, I fell in love. I had, a great life at this point. I still do. We moved over here to Maryland. And I started to pursue my master's. So I got about halfway through my master's last year and then realized I don't really need it and I'm super like
Yes.
in debt.
That's the worst.
Yeah. But I realized I could still put it on my resume and just put like, you know,
Was it a master's program?
Yeah, Master's of Business Administration, classes, bam, bam, bam,
Right.
here's the 3 classes, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
that still reflect,
yeah.
right?
But
Because you did that.
Yeah, but once they meet you, they'll be like, yeah, we
Yeah.
know what you're doing. Yeah, we know you know.
So,
Yeah.
for me, this is huge because, like, I never followed through with school. I always had unhealthy, abusive relationships. Mental health was a huge part. Just from the beginning of 12 years old, just wanting to medicate myself to not feel and like being able to feel again and being able to love and being able to love myself. So we moved out here, we got married. I got a great career where I'm helping other people, you know, that suffer from addiction. And I love giving back in that sense. I think that was kind of like a missing piece.
Doesn't that kind of like help you maintain your own recovery too?
It
By
really
helping
does.
other people? That's what I found. I don't know.
It really
It's
does.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like the feeling that I get when somebody reaches out for help, I understand how hard that is.
Yeah.
And so knowing that I've been able to lead them into a direction where it can change their life
Right,
and where they
there
can.
is hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there is hope, and it's so discouraging, you know, because I tried to get clean many times. I'd get like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then that mental health piece would kick in,
Yeah.
and then I just couldn't see the other side.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I mean, my advice is always to stick it out, like give yourself a chance. You know, but it could crop up at any time.
Yeah.
Like yours was a year and a half. I had a depression spiel 2 years in.
Yeah.
You know, like this last time, 6 months, I was like, I'm gonna save, you know, I was so excited, and then like 2 years, I'm depressed, and then I had to get on an antidepressant, and which I'm so glad I did. So like, that's why aftercare is so important. That's why
Right.
like building a network of people, like that woman who came and dropped, like that probably really helped.
Oh, yeah.
Staying connected, you're in a new place, and that's why it's so important, like for the first year, to just find your own network, do something.
Absolutely.
Like if it's IOP, if it's NA, if it's AA, just do something and be around positive people. Because that was the piece always missing with me.
Well, I'm a huge believer that, like, you know, the majority of the time there is some type of mental health that's going along, and you become depressed when you're using. Now, whether that, you know, is because you're using, you know, or because you use because of that. Whatever.
Right.
My mom used to always say that to me when I was in high school because she was a social worker, and it's like, are you depressed because you're using, or are you using because you're
Right.
depressed?
Right.
And then she's like,
Both.
actually, it doesn't matter because
Right.
we can't address your mental health
Yeah.
unless you're not using.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge believer that like you have to take care of your mental health. And it doesn't like just because I was in therapy and just because I got on proper medication, that doesn't mean that these things go away.
Right.
Like there are certain things, if you've been through certain things, especially when they're trauma related, or if you have PTSD, that doesn't go away.
No.
You know what I'm saying? There's not a pill, there's not that's just gonna be like, oh, like I'm never gonna be triggered again. And I was telling you a little bit before this too, because I've done a lot of work on myself, like a lot of work, from the tools that I learned in the 12 steps. And then like I switched my programming more towards a very individualized mental, spiritual, and physical, taking care of those aspects. And so if I feel like I'm going to use, if I get tempted, or for whatever reason I feel like I want to use, I'm starting to fantasize over drinking or using, I go to a meeting. I, you know, and whatever, I was in NA, but like there's AAs
Right.
all around me, and
Right.
to me it's like whatever, I need to remember where I came from. I need to be around other people that know what I'm going through, and so like that's kind of what I do for the addiction portion of my recovery. today is like when that pops up, I speak with someone else in recovery, or I'll go to a meeting. More often it's mental health related anymore, I think, with the amount of time that I have versus actual like desire to use or the feelings of wanting to use. And so, you know, if I know, and spiritual is a very big aspect to me. And so, like, if I have an episode or if I feel like my mental health is really struggling, then I'll go see a therapist. And I was telling her a little while ago that just recently, actually, in the past couple months, I started waking up in the middle of the night just bawling my eyes out, not being able to sleep. And like, it was pretty much every trauma that I've ever gone through in my entire life was like forefront of my mind. I couldn't get it out. I had to like write it all out. My throat felt swollen, like I needed to talk, and I didn't know if I needed to tell my story to inspire or motivate someone, or if I needed to go to counseling and talk about all the messed up stuff that I've been through. But you know, this went on for like a couple months. It's been about 3 weeks now since that's happened, but I finally reached out because when that was happening, I'm like, I've done so much work on myself.
Wow.
I know, like, I freaking meditate. I was telling you I worked with a remote healer from Chicago. Like the last time that I knew that I had like anger and that I had these things going on, like I did what I needed to do spiritually to connect with God to get the healing that I need. And this time, the past couple months, that wasn't enough and it wasn't working. And so I actually reached out to somebody that was in recovery that I met through working in where I work, and she had suggested this hypnotherapist. And so I'm actually going to start that next week. And
please let me know.
Yeah, let me know how that goes.
I like want to go.
oh my gosh, I'm really excited because, you know, I was explaining too that when certain things have come up before, you know, my psychiatrist had told me like there's situations that happen that can trigger something, and a big move, because I would find these things would come up after moving to California, moving back to Washington, moving to Maryland. And he said, like, that's a trauma, even though it's really good, that's still a huge change, so that can like trigger traumas that you've been through. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I logically can connect this event that I'm going through with my triggers and with why I'm feeling this way. And this time recently, it's not like that. I'm like, no big thing has happened to me. I don't know. So that made it even worse. And I'm obsessing. I don't know why, all this stuff. And finally I reached out to my mom because she's like the most awesome person in the world, and she was a social worker forever. And I should have reached out to her a long time ago. And, you know, she helped me understand that I have had a lot of very strong emotions lately, deep enough to where they correlate to the emotions that I felt during those traumas.
Right.
And so then the light bulb went off. And so with this hypnotherapist, she's supposed to be like where I go back to that event, and it should be the only time that I should ever have to go back and like be there, but I'm disassociated from it. I don't feel it. Nothing is happening to me, but I'm able to disassociate those emotions
Extract them.
with that.
Right.
That way, when these strong emotions come up in the future, the hope is that it will not trigger a trauma. And so like as far as how I take care of my recovery today, if I have a red flag, if I have a trigger, I act on it. You know, whether it's reaching out to somebody that's in recovery because it's substance use related, whether it's, oh man, like this big mental health thing just happened and I haven't been in counseling for probably 5 years. My spirituality is taking me really far, but you know, this is something that needed to happen, and so this is something that I'm doing to make sure that I'm okay. And the spiritual side of just connecting, you know, with my God and my higher power, that's always like at the forefront of starting my day. If I'm angry, like please remove the anger and replace it with, you know, with love.
You
and
gave
like
me good advice that one time for how to start my day.
Yeah. Well, I'm just a believer that the mind is so powerful, and like, you know, you can train your subconscious to believe what you want to believe. And so if I need to say the same thing 5 times a day and visualize what that means, then I'm going to be happy more times than I'm going to be angry or sad. And so, I mean, I'm very blessed like where I'm at today. I have an amazing husband. I have an amazing stepson. I am like, and I know that we're not supposed to promise the world, but like the world has happened for me. I am not even kidding. Like I have achieved more than I ever thought I would in my life. The love and the friends that I have in my life is pure. In my career, I have achieved larger than I ever thought that I would. Because I would always say, like, if they can be a manager, why can't I? You know what I'm saying? Why can't I? That's the conversation that you and I had. Like, you know, we gotta believe in ourselves. Like, there's no reason why that other person that you admire can't be you.
Right.
You know, you can be what you admire when you see those qualities in somebody else that you like and that you love. Like, you gotta remove that, like, fear and that self-doubt and just go for it. So, you know, the only, like, hope that there is, you know, to stay clean from drugs and alcohol. Or the only promise, right, is to stay free from drugs and alcohol.
How free do you want to be? Because there's so much more.
Yeah.
There's so much more.
Yeah. So, I mean...
So you got the promises.
That's like...
You got the promises.
I got what I worked for.
Right.
Yes.
And you worked for it.
Yeah,
And
I
it
got
takes-
what I worked for.
And it takes work, you know. Like a lot of people just want to get clean and just, where's my
Have everything else.
Mercedes? Where's, you know.
Right. Because they feel physically better, but
Right.
they need to work
Right.
also on the mental, the spiritual,
Yeah.
all that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so
That was
much.
awesome.
Yeah?
That was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. That's
Well,
it.
thank you
No,
for...
that was
That was great.
me.
that was so cool.
And yeah, this is Melissa and Nick again, Sarah Watson, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leaves of Change. Stay tuned for more inspirational stories of recovery. For more information about Tree of Hope and more podcasts, check out www.treeofhopeassociation.com. Also, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter by searching Tree of Hope Association.